Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about labeling errors and how to avoid the 5 most common labeling errors that we see. So, um, if you're wondering where can you find these 5 most common, they're actually in the FDA eSTAR for submitting a 510K or a de novo, and they list these as actual questions in the FDA eSTAR. They say, where can we find this in your labeling? Which document and which page can we look at to find this information? But people leave this out all the time. And then when they go to prepare their 510K, they just list the document and they don't list the page because it's not there. And they think, well, maybe I can fix that later. Fix it up front. Look at what the labeling section asks you for and make sure that you include those things in your instruction for use and in your labels. That's the best way to make sure that you've covered everything. There's also a specific regulation for labels. That's 21 CFR 801. So if you're wondering where are the rules for what goes on a label, that's where it is. 21 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations is what CFR means, and it's 801. And there are a whole bunch of different subparts for that, and we're going to cover one of the more common ones, but you can read through that section and it'll tell you what things are required and what things are not, including things like the UDI and what the exemptions are for UDI and when you have to use it and when you don't have to use it. And you should read through that section so you know exactly what's exempt and what's not instead of what you think is exempt. So we're going to walk you through the different requirements here. And the first one that we're going to cover is MR safety. So at the beginning of the EMC or electrical safety section of the submission, it asks you if your device has been evaluated for magnetic resonance safety. So can it be around an MRI machine? Because these have big magnets that draw metal to them. And so if you have a device that could be susceptible to magnets, it'll get sucked towards the machine. So if it's implanted in your body, that's a serious problem. It'll get sucked right through your skin, or you'll get thrown towards the machine. And they actually have pictures at the FDA that they share with people of things like tables and wheelchairs being slammed against the machine when somebody turned it on but didn't clear the room of all the things that are susceptible to magnets. So there are 4 different options in that section. You can say it has not been evaluated. You would not put down it has not been evaluated if you feel it's made of metal. If it's made of metal that could be attracted by a magnet, you should not be saying not evaluated. You should be saying it's unsafe because you don't know otherwise. Now, if you say that it's safe, so you use the green symbol on this screen, then you have to have testing data to prove that, and they want that test data. And there is an ASTM standard for that. The second option would be conditional. So this means it must be this far from the actual field in order to not cause problems, things like burns or actually pulling it out of the skin. So if it has conditional, then you would have actually tested how close it can get to that field. You'd have the test data for that. If it doesn't fall into the safe or unsafe or safe or conditional category, it should automatically go in the unsafe category. They do have that non-evaluated category, but that would be for something that you're almost certain that it is not a problem, but you don't have any testing data to prove that it's not a problem. So things like cotton. Cotton would not be a problem. Now, rivets in your jeans, that'd be a problem. A zipper in your jean would be a problem. Sometimes thread has metallic in it. A lot of times dyes are metallic. So if you have a dye in there, that could be a problem. You think, well, oh, they're just polyester shorts. But if it has a metal dye in there, that's a problem. So if you are absolutely positive that it's safe, but you don't have the testing data, you could put down not evaluated. That's when you use that option. If you're pretty sure it has metal in it, then you should be selecting unsafe. It's okay to mark unsafe without testing data. It is not okay to put not evaluated if you're pretty sure it has metal in it. And it's not okay to put conditional or safe if it does have metal in it and you don't have the testing data. So I hope that makes it clear. And you should be prepared for that. That should be part of your testing plan to do that MR safety. And they're like, who would ever put this kind of machinery in the MR environment? They're not putting it inside the machine, they're putting it in the room on the wrong side of the shielding. And why are they doing that? Well, they made a mistake. It's a use error. And it happens a lot. People use the room for storage and like, well, we think people are smart enough not to turn on the machine until they remove that stuff from the area. But that happens. And that's why the FDA has those pictures. And somebody could be seriously hurt. And it has happened. So that's why you have to have this very common mistake. They ask for it right in the eSTAR. So that's number one. Now we're going to go to number two on our list. Oh, and I'm sorry I screwed this up already. Okay. So the one that we're going to cover here is RX only. Um, RX only stands for prescription use only. And at the bottom of the screen, I hope you can see that it says RX only or R with the X through the leg of the R. Either one of those is acceptable. People have come up with a whole bunch of variations of that. And in general, if it's easily understood and it looks like something the FDA has seen before, they'll probably accept it. I've given you an example that I've used in many submissions that they have accepted, but it is perfectly okay to put it exactly the way that I have it shown on the bottom of the screen here. Why? Because that's pulled directly from the regulations. So you can do it either way. And the third way you can do it without using the symbol, you can always opt not to use the symbol, but then you have to say that full statement that I show up above. It's caution, federal law restricts this device to sale or use on the order of, and the licensed practitioner part can be flexible. You can change the wording of that to be more specific to a certain type of user. The 21 CFR 801.109 is the specific regulation where you find that explained. But the FDA will ask, is it a prescription use device, and where on which document and what page can we find that symbol? And they also expect you to also have it on your labels, not just the instruction for use. So both the MR safety symbol and the RX only should be somewhere on your label and also in your instruction for use. Both places, not just one or the other. Next item on the list. This is going to be manufactured by. So the FDA asks you in the 510K, what is the address, what is the name, and where can we find that in your labeling? You need it on your label. You can't not have it on your label and just have it in your instruction for use. And you need it in your instruction for use as well. And you should state manufactured by. And a lot of people, but why do I need that there? There is a possibility that it could be distributed by the company that's there. It could be manufactured for the company that's there, or it could be manufactured by the company that's specifically listed. All three options exist. That's why you need to say manufactured by or distributed by or manufactured for. But when you're submitting a 510K, you may not have decided who your distributor is yet. And the FDA is not asking you who's distributing it. They want an example of a label. So put your name on it and your address on it. Ignore who your distributor is and ignore who your importer is going to be. Don't worry about that. Just the specification developer address should be there. At a later date, after you get the 510K, then you can change that to be distributed by or manufactured for whoever that partner is going to be. And you can have more than one, and you may want to change it. But for the purposes of the 510K, you should have it be whoever the specification developer is, because they're the sponsor that's submitting it to the FDA, and they're going to own the 510K. So put manufactured by, and it doesn't mean you're actually manufacturing it. You can have a contract manufacturer. It means you're the legal manufacturer according to the FDA regulations. So that's how we use the symbol there. So don't get confused. Well, but we don't manufacture anything. We outsource. That's okay. You're still the legal manufacturer according to the FDA. So that's how you use that symbol properly. And I find a whole bunch of companies, they leave out the phone number, they leave out the full address. There are some exemptions for having less than a full address, but not many. And in general, a lot of companies are going to, when they want to save space, they're using a QR reader code for the complete instruction for use. You gotta at least give them the full address. Why? Because that's the address that people are supposed to use if they have a complaint or there's an adverse event about the product. So you don't have a lot of flexibility on this. You have to do it this way. Okay, the next item on the list that we see a lot of mistakes on is the indication for use. Now, people like to put in intended use and indication for use in their instructions for use. No, just indication for use in your user manual or user guide or the instruction for use or direction for use, whatever you want to call it. That should only be the indications, not intended use. Intended use is a high level generic use. I've highlighted what would be an example of a generic use. You go into the, and I just chose for the sake of example here, an orthopedic screw. So for an orthopedic screw, the proper code is HWC, and when you look up the regulation, it's 888, which is orthopedics in general, and then .3040 is the specific regulation for a bone fixation fastener or a screw, and it would be intended to be implanted because that's where they go, is inside the body, and for fixation of bone fracture. So the whatever your device name is intended to be implanted for fixation of bone fractures. That's too generic. That wouldn't ever be acceptable to the FDA. Unless this device could be used everywhere in the body. In general, it's for something more than that. So I'll give you an example. So if the FDA approved you for a generic use, and this can be used everywhere, whatever they approve for the indications, that's what you're putting under indication for use. But don't use the heading intended use. Instead, use the heading indications for use. And this would be an example of a typical, or maybe not so typical, but an indication for a bone screw. This bone screw is specifically designed for ligament fixation when you break a ligament. So it's not for bones at all. And they still have it under that same code, but the FDA allows it because they presented data to support this use. But it's for those specific ligaments. And so this whole entire document would be included here, but I highlighted an example of what could be used as your indication, but you would actually, for this device, use the whole entire block. And this is the specific use, and that's what they want in your user manual or your indications for, instructions for use or your directions for use, not the generic. And don't put both. It's just wasting extra space and it adds no value. The FDA has a substantial equivalence comparison that they're doing, and you may explain why you think it falls within the intended use, but that is in the 510K submission, not in your labeling. So only indication for use. I hope I've made that very clear. Next, we have the glossary for symbols. For glossaries, the FDA says, if you have used symbols, where can we find the glossary of the symbols in your instruction manual? What page can it be found on? Now, I'm showing you what we see 99% of the time. However, sometimes we have an FDA reviewer that was very conscientious and read verbatim exactly what the regulation says about use of symbols. And the regulation does say that they want you to identify what the source of the symbol is and what the name of the symbol is according to that source, not just the explanation of the symbol and a picture of the symbol. They want you to add another column that explains the source and what the number is of that symbol or identification is of that symbol. So that means adding another column. Now, do all the other companies out there that have labels on the market need to go back and change their labeling? No, they don't. The FDA has not enforced that. But you will find reviewers that say, no, you have to have this third column in here that explains this. It is rare, but it does happen with FDA reviewers. It will almost always happen with the third-party reviewers because that's what they're used to doing according to the regulation. This is what it says, so that's what we're going to make you do. They're very literal. Um, so would what I'm showing on the screen be acceptable? Like I said, about 99% of the time, 1 out of 100 reviewers makes you do this. Why can I say fairly confidently that it's 1 out of 100? Because it's only been requested once in the last year by a reviewer for our company, and we have like about 100 submissions. So 1 out of 100 is my estimated frequency of when they ask you to do this. And if I were to guess, whoever that reviewer is probably has X notified body experience. They work for a notified body at some point, and they have a little more experience of that type, or they're a subcontractor that's been brought in and they're following everything literally exactly the way the regulation says. And that's just how they're doing things. It's not wrong, but the company would be like, why do we have to do that? Or our competitor didn't have to do that. It takes up extra space. It's not worth your breath. They're going to win the argument because it's in the regulation. And technically, everybody else is wrong, but that explains why we see some differences. Make sure you're using the symbols appropriately. One of the symbols I've gotten wrong, because I make mistakes too, the non-sterile symbol. So it's a triangle that says non-sterile in it. You only use that when the device is delivered non-sterile and the device is supposed to be sterile before it's used. So that means the user is going to sterilize it and you've given them instructions. If you have a device that is non-sterile and is not supposed to be sterilized and is not used sterile, then you do not use that symbol. I used it incorrectly. I didn't read carefully. I was corrected by an FDA reviewer. They were right. I was wrong. Now I'm passing that knowledge on to you. I'm sure I'll make another mistake, but don't sweat it. The end will not come because you made an error in making your manual or making your label. All of those are drafts that the FDA will make you make changes to. I have never had a label go through the FDA without a change that they've made ever. And that's hundreds and hundreds of submissions that I've seen go through the FDA. Not one has gone through without a single error in the labels that the FDA wanted you to change. And you can argue whether you're right or they're right, but you're going to make the change in the end because you want to get your 510K clearance. So I'm just telling you up front, it's going to happen. You're going to get asked to make changes at the AI hold. You're going to get asked to make changes at the very end, 2 days before you get your 510K, and you're going to listen to the reviewer and do what they ask because you want your 510K. So don't sweat it. It's a minor deficiency, not a major deficiency when you have to make labeling changes at the last minute, and it only takes minutes for the most part. Even when you have to make a lot of changes, it's still usually pretty quick in the scheme of things. It doesn't require testing for the most part. Okay, so if you want to learn more about labels, one of your options is to go to our website, and I guess I don't need to share that anymore. I guess I can go to full screen. So if you want to learn more about labeling and see our labeling templates and our labeling checklists, which is the best way to make sure your label is correct, go to this website page on our website. It's called labeling-procedure. That's the slug for it. It's where we sell SYS 30, which is our labeling procedure, and it gives you a checklist. There's one for US, Canada, Europe. You can go through that. It'll even reference what the standards are. There's one for symbols. There's one for information provided by the manufacturer that was updated in March. So if you aren't aware of that change, it's ISO 20417. You should buy a new copy of that. These are the kinds of things that you have to stay up to date on and update your templates for and update your checklists. But a checklist is absolutely the best way to make sure you're compliant. Thank you very much and see you next week. If you have a suggestion for a new video, put it down in the comments below. Bye-bye.